Syria this Monday, pro-government forces appearing to regain control of the capital, Damascus. But the new battleground is the wealthy city of Aleppo. Until this week, it was largely sheltered from the violence that has killed tens of thousands of people across the country. And in another first today, Syria has confirmed it does indeed hold an arsenal of chemical weapons. It says it will use them if there's an attack by foreign forces.
Any stocks of WMD or any unconventional weapon that the Syrian Arab Republic possess would never be used against civilian or against the Syrian people during this crisis, at any circumstances, no matter how the crisis would evolve, no matter how. So this is the title. All the stocks of these weapons that the Syrian Arab Republic possess are monitored and guarded by the Syrian army. These weapons are meant to be used only and strictly in the event of external aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic. نحن بحالة دفاع عن النفس. نعم قد يحصل اشتباك في شوارع معينة بأحياء معينة، لكن الأمر حاليا الوضع الأمني أفضل بكثير، نطمئن الجميع.
Well, there have been developments on the diplomatic front as well this Monday. The Arab League says that President Bashar al-Assad must step down immediately. They promised him and his family a safe exit if he agrees to relinquish power. Well, tonight we ask if we're really looking at the death throes of the Assad regime, and if so, what's next? Let me introduce you to my guest tonight. Here in the studio with me is Andrew Exum. He's a senior fellow at the Centre for New American Security. He's also a former officer in the US Army. Good evening to you. Also with us tonight is Luis Peral. He's a research fellow at the European Institute for Security Studies. We've got two other guests coming with us later in the programme as well. But if I could just kick off with you, Andrew. I'll just put it to you straight. We've been talking about this for the past few days. The violence in Syria has escalated dramatically in the last few weeks. Are we nearing the end game?
I don't think so. Having said that, there are a lot of things that we simply don't know. We don't know. All parties in Syria have an interest of misrepresenting their relative strength to the outside world. So the insurgents want to proclaim that they're almost close to overthrowing the al-Assad regime. The al-Assad regime, meanwhile, you just saw the Syrian Foreign Ministry spokesperson say the situation's much, much better, than that they're doing fine. We do know that the rebels have had a lot more success using improvised explosive devices, roadside bombs and whatnot, to not only assassinate key members of the Syrian regime, but to also degrade the Syrian military. I think upwards of 20 Syrian soldiers are dying each day. One of the things we don't know is exactly what effect this is having on the cohesiveness of the Syrian fighting forces, on the Syrian regime army, and we don't know what effect this is having on the morale. What we do know from these types of civil wars in general is they tend to last about 9 years in the modern era. So by that standard, we're nowhere near the end. However, we saw, as we saw in Libya, that these conflicts can be much, much shorter. But unfortunately, there's just a lot we don't know on the ground right now, and there's a lot of incentives for actors on the ground to misrepresent what's taking place. All
right, now I can bring in another guest with us in Madrid tonight. Bara Mikhail is a senior researcher at Freed. Thanks for being with us tonight. You're also a member, you're Syrian, and you're a member of a minority group. I believe you're a Christian. Just talk us through a bit about who... there are a lot of ethnic groups within Syria. Which of those groups are still supporting Bashar al-Assad at this stage? Bara Mikhail in Madrid. He can't hear us, unfortunately. All right. Luis Peral, perhaps I can put that one to you. There are groups still supporting al-Assad, believe it or not. Many people in the West would find that very difficult to believe, but they are there. Who are these people?
I'm not an expert on the internal situation. I believe that some of the elite could be still supporting al-Assad, but we have seen defections, including in the Sunni families that were allied to the regime. So this is also perhaps there's the beginning of the end as well of these alliances between different groups in order to hold to the regime.
Let me put it another way. In Syria, are we still looking at an uprising and a crackdown, or are we slipping into a sectarian war where you've got community fighting community? I mean, we've heard a lot about attacks by Sunnis. We've heard attacks on Shias. We've heard, it's all going on. They've got refugees, Shias leaving for Lebanon. You've got Iraqi Christians who are now going back to Iraq. I mean, is this what it's come to now? Is this community fighting community?
There are indeed fears of a sectarian conflict in Syria. but indiscriminate violence is indiscriminate. And that affects to all sections of the population. So what they are witnessing now is a humanitarian crisis, a refugee crisis that does not follow the ethnic divides in Syria. It affects everybody. And of course it shows, in my view, that the lack of humanitarian response has important, if not very, very dangerous security implications in the region.
Baran Mikhail, I believe you can hear us now. Baran Mikhail in Madrid. Just give us your take on the situation. Given how much the situation has accelerated over the past few weeks, what are your thoughts right now?
Well, I think that if we look at the situation and the way it prevailed through the, let's say, the past week or the 5 last days, there's been an acceleration and there's been a serious blow that has been addressed to the regime. I mean, the loss of a part of the security apparatus is something that comes with great consequences on the, I would say, on the stability of the regime. But at the same time, I would also say that we shouldn't consider that we shouldn't expect ourselves to have already entered into a kind of post-Bashar al-Assad era. What I mean by that is that we can see that there are fights in the streets, that Aleppo now is under fight, that there are also problems in Damascus, but at the same time, I would say that we should distinguish between symbols and reality. Symbols are strong. We can see that the fighters are more and more organized and without making the difference when it comes to the regime. But anyway, they have strengthened. But at the same time, I believe that the regime and the army are still coherent, are still making the difference. Now, does it mean that the symbol will keep on separated from realities? Well, not necessarily. I think that even though the symbols are different from the reality, I also think that in the coming days or coming weeks, we could have a situation in which we could see this symbol have an impact on the population and then allow the population itself to go more and more towards and asking for the end of the regime. But once again, I would say that, I mean, by today and at the moment where I am speaking, I'm not sure we can already talk about our frank entering into the era of post-Bashar al-Assad.
Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think that those words of caution are correct. I think that at this point, however, the international community has to at least begin to start planning for the transition for what happens after Bashar al-Assad. I think that the gentleman's correct. We should expect that we shouldn't be surprised if, for example, if there are many more years of conflict in Syria. And, you know, again, when I look at just the order of battle and the amount of equipment that the Syrian army has, at least on paper, you know, I would expect this conflict to last for a bit longer. Having said that, for a variety of reasons, to include the chemical weapons that the Syrian foreign minister spokesperson mentioned just earlier, I think that the international community has to start planning for what happens if we see a collapse in Syria. Let's
come back to the chemical weapons issue in a moment for sure. I'd just like to introduce another guest who's just joined us. Good evening to you. Basma Kodmani, you're a spokesperson for Syria's main opposition, the Syrian National Council. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Now, as I've been mentioning, very fast-moving situation in Syria from last Wednesday when we had that attack on the ministers in the capital. We've seen the fighting in Damascus. It's now moved to Aleppo. Within your organisation, are you preparing now for a post-Assad Syria, and how are you doing that?
Preparations have been going on for quite a while now and have accelerated over the last month or so. The opposition has met, the Syrian National Council and other opposition groups met in Cairo, agreed on a joint vision for the future as well as for the transition period. So the framework for the transition is ready. There is a call for a transition government now by a number of countries, and we are discussing what is the right timing for that and the process for this to happen. We are definitely preparing. Now, on the ground, of course, the main effort is coordination between the different groups. This is the big challenge, really. People have learned to survive where they are, including by carrying small arms and organizing themselves at a local level. If we are to take the issue to the more strategic level, there needs to be coordination. This being said, we do not count on pure military confrontation. There's no hope in this case, but we do count on the morale of the army being very low and massive defections, on the delegitimization by the rest of the the international community, and particularly by countries who still believe that Assad is worth supporting.
All right, and the latest to call for a transitional government is the Arab League. Today they called on the Syrian National Council to work with the Free Syrian Army. I'm just wondering, though, the Free Syrian Army does incorporate a lot of different types of fighters. You've got defected soldiers from the Syrian army. There are some elements of Al-Qaeda within that. There are Mujahideen. How much control does the SNC have over this force?
Okay, the Free Syrian Army does not include Al-Qaeda, let's be very clear.
But there are fighters within Syria from Al-Qaeda.
No, they're not within any of the groups who are part of the revolution. None whatsoever. These are groups individuals who have come in and actually have been trained in the past by the Syrian regime to be sent to Iraq. They've been jailed and taken out of jail,
but they're committed
and thrown into the scene, and we have to cope with these people, but certainly not cooperate with them. So these are not part of the scene. That has to be clear.
But that's my point. What will you do to maintain security when the forces fighting to oust this regime have become so broad?
Well,
and so
I think we need to take it to what a normal relationship should be between a political opposition and military opposition. There needs to be coordination on specific grounds, and this has happened. In fact, the grounds have been set for how this cooperation and coordination happens. Now, how it happens at a moment of imminent danger and during on a tactical level is probably more challenging. But this is the purpose of the actual work now, is that we know these groups. Within the SNC, there is knowledge of all of these groups. Now, the issue is how you put all of this information together and get these groups to be in contact. We do have, and that is, I think, most importantly, is what we call networks of trust. That is point persons within each community and each region and each city who are able to communicate. And that is to avoid any free action, uncontrolled action, and specifically any vengeance that might occur.
The al-Assad regime does still have its supporters within Syria, particularly, of course, among the Alawite community. In a post-Assad Syria, how will you ensure that they are protected?
Look, the Alawite community is living a terrible ordeal, and it is both killing and a victim. And that's, I think, the real tragedy of the community, is that the regime has put it in a situation where it is under very close control by the regime itself, because it is not allowed to defect. The regime is harsher on anyone from the Alawite community who opposes the regime. It has traditionally not supported the community, and today is making it hostage to its own strategy. So our work has been with Alawites and with other groups to connect them, to build dialogue. This is happening, and the Alawite community is mobilizing at all levels. The intellectuals, the youth groups, the business community, all of these are now moving, and community leaders are reaching out to other groups. They know that their future lies with the rest of the Syrian society.
There have been divisions within your organisation about the dominance of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, of course, is the most organised political faction within the Syrian National Council. It does have the funding and the international connections that give it that edge. Are we looking at a situation where they will be the dominant force in Syrian politics, as we're now seeing in Egypt?
I don't think so. I think we need to look at a group that is indeed structured and organized more than any other group. But in terms of representation, they have just one portion of 12 other groups who are represented in the council. Now, in the future, we will face an organized group. It is for the other communities to organize. But for the moment, we are looking to build an inclusive and a joint platform for the future that is not built on majority, that is not built on, that is not based on who is more organized than others. There are needs, vital needs of each community in this country, whether they represent 1% or 60% of the country. The needs are the same and the rights should be the same. And this is what we need to guarantee. This is in all the declarations that have been issued by the council as well as by opposition groups in general.
I know you can't stay with us for long, so just one more question, if you will, before you go. We've seen that action at the UN Security Council has been blocked by Russia and by China. It looks like there won't be any further action down that road. What would you like the international community, the Friends of Syria, if you like, to do now to help Syria?
Well, we would have liked the Security Council to manage the Syrian crisis responsibly. We believe there has been an attitude that has not been responsible by Russia and China. We now are looking to the Friends of Syria and any countries that are willing to support the Syrian people in their legitimate aspirations to, first of all, provide for humanitarian aid. The humanitarian situation is now an emergency in Syria. No one is calling it an emergency, and it is a real emergency. We are really in a situation where we cannot understand that humanitarian aid is not reaching the Syrian population. Efforts have been made. The French have definitely made efforts. Other countries have done some of what needs to be done, but the needs are growing exponentially, and there is no response to that. That is definitely an immediate need that the Friends of Syria need to respond to. But beyond that, we know that huge sacrifices have been made to gain some points where the revolutionary groups are controlling on the ground. It's a decisive moment. The biggest and the most ancient cities of the world, Damascus, Aleppo, are today under heavy attack by airplanes, by helicopters. How you stop that, I think, is something that the Friends of Syria need to consider now very seriously and immediately.
All right, Basma Kamani, thank you very much indeed. All right, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we'll have the international headlines for you. We'll also have the second part of tonight's debate. We'll get some reaction to what we've just heard. So don't go away and do stay with us.